I thought I'd seen every kind of horror the world could serve up. After 15 years as a detective in Chicago, including 3 years working gang violence in the worst neighborhoods, you learn to compartmentalize the unthinkable. But that foggy October morning in Millbrook Valley, standing over a drainage culvert on Riverside Road, I realized that all my training, all my experience with human cruelty, hadn't prepared me for what I found there. My sister Emma, broken and bleeding, her designer clothes torn and mud-stained, whispering through swollen lips the words that would shatter everything I thought I knew about her perfect life. It was Marcus, my husband. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The call had come at 5:47 a.m. from Officer Janet Reeves, a rookie I'd trained 2 years earlier when I still worked patrol in the valley. "Detective Morgan Carter," she'd said, her voice shaking, "we found a woman matching your sister's description. You need to get down here. Now." I'd thrown on yesterday's jeans and a Northwestern University sweatshirt, my service weapon clipped to my belt out of habit, and driven through the empty streets of Millbrook Valley like a woman possessed. The town that had raised us both, with its white picket fences and Sunday morning church bells, suddenly felt foreign under the gray dawn sky. When I arrived at the scene, the ambulance was already there, red and blue lights painting the wet asphalt in harsh colors. Emma lay in a concrete drainage ditch beside the road, the kind of place where runoff collected during storms. She was conscious but barely, her auburn hair matted with blood and debris, her left arm bent at an angle that made my stomach turn. "Ma'am, you can't," the young paramedic started to say as I approached, but Officer Reeves cut him off. "That's Detective Carter. It's her sister." I knelt beside Emma, my hands trembling despite years of training to stay calm in crisis situations. Her face was a canvas of bruises, purple and black marks that told a story I didn't want to read. One eye was swollen completely shut, and there were finger-shaped bruises around her throat that made my blood run cold. "Emma," I whispered, taking her uninjured hand. "It's me. It's Morgan. You're going to be okay." Her good eye fluttered open, struggling to focus. When she saw me, tears began streaming down her cheek, cutting clean tracks through the dirt and blood. She tried to speak, but only a rasp came out. "Don't try to talk," I said, squeezing her fingers gently. "The paramedics are here. We're going to get you to the hospital." But she shook her head weakly, her grip tightening on my hand with surprising strength. She pulled me closer, her lips moving urgently. I leaned down until my ear was inches from her mouth. "It was Marcus," she breathed, each word a struggle. "My husband," he tried to. The sentence hung unfinished in the cold morning air, but I didn't need her to complete it. The evidence was written across her body in bruises and breaks. Marcus Whitfield, the man who'd swept my sister off her feet 3 years ago with his charm and his money. The successful investment advisor who'd given her everything she'd ever dreamed of, the mansion on Elm Street, the luxury cars, the jewelry that caught the light at every charity gala in town. I'd never liked him. Something about his smile always seemed calculated, like he was constantly running numbers in his head. But Emma had been so happy, so radiant on their wedding day, that I'd convinced myself my discomfort was just big sister protectiveness. Now, looking at what remained of that happiness broken and bleeding in a ditch, I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. It wasn't just anger, though there was plenty of that. It was the same feeling I'd gotten during my biggest cases, the ones that kept me awake at night until I solved them. The feeling that told me this wasn't random violence or a crime of passion gone wrong. This was planned. Calculated. And if Marcus Whitfield thought he could destroy my sister and walk away clean, he was about to learn exactly what kind of mistake he'd made. The paramedics worked quickly, stabilizing Emma's arm and checking for internal injuries. As they loaded her onto the stretcher, she grabbed my wrist one more time. "Don't let him." She started, then stopped, fear flickering across her battered features. "Don't let him what?" I asked. "Don't let him win," she whispered. I watched the ambulance disappear down Riverside Road, its siren echoing off the hills that surrounded our small town. Officer Reeves approached me, her notepad ready. "Detective, I know this is personal, but we need to start building a case. What can you tell me about the victim's relationship with her husband? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I looked back at the ditch where my sister had lain broken, then at the skid marks on the wet pavement that suggested a vehicle had stopped suddenly. In the distance, I could see the outline of the Whitfield mansion sitting on its perfectly manicured hill, overlooking the town like a fortress. Everything, I said quietly. I'm going to tell you everything. But even as I spoke those words, I knew the official investigation would only be the beginning. Because Marcus Whitfield had money, connections, and influence in Millbrook Valley. He played golf with the mayor and donated generously to the police benevolent fund. What he didn't have was a sister who'd spent 15 years learning exactly how to take down men who thought they were untouchable. The Millbrook Valley General Hospital smelled like disinfectant and broken promises. I'd been in enough emergency rooms during my career to know that smell, but this time it felt personal, invasive, like it was seeping into my clothes and following me home. Emma had been in surgery for 3 hours, and I'd spent every minute of it pacing the waiting room like a caged animal. My name is Morgan Carter, and I became a detective for the same reason most cops do. I believed in justice. Not the fairy tale kind you see in movies, but the real, messy, complicated version where you fight for every small victory against people who think the rules don't apply to them. I'd worked my way up from patrol officer to detective in record time, earning my gold shield by being smarter, tougher, and more persistent than anyone expected a woman to be in Millbrook Valley's Old Boys Club. I specialized in financial crimes and domestic violence cases, the kind of investigations that required patience and attention to detail. While other detectives chased down drug dealers and car thieves, I followed paper trails and bank records. I'd taken down 3 corrupt city officials, a pyramid scheme that had bilked elderly residents out of their retirement savings, and more wife-beating husbands than I cared to count. But none of that professional experience had prepared me for seeing my own sister broken and bleeding in a ditch. Emma and I had grown up in a modest house on Maple Street, raised by our grandmother after our parents died in a car accident when I was 16 and she was 12. Gran taught us that family was everything, that we protected each other no matter what. When Emma graduated from college with her business degree, I was the one who helped her move to the city. When she came back 3 years ago with Marcus on her arm and a diamond ring on her finger, I was the one who walked her down the aisle. I should have seen the signs. Dr. Sarah Hendricks emerged from the surgical wing at 11:30 a.m., still wearing her scrubs, exhaustion etched across her face. I'd known Sarah since high school. She'd been Emma's best friend before medical school took her to Boston for 8 years. She's stable, Dr. Hendricks said without preamble. Broken ribs, punctured lung, severe concussion, and a compound fracture in her left arm. But she's alive, Morgan. She's going to make it. I sank into one of the plastic chairs, relief flooding through me like a drug. Can I see her? Not yet. She needs rest, and honestly, you need to prepare yourself. The injuries. Sarah paused, choosing her words carefully. They're consistent with prolonged abuse. This wasn't a one-time incident. The X-rays show old fractures that healed improperly, scar tissue from previous injuries. Morgan, this has been going on for a while. The words hit me like physical blows. My sister, the valedictorian who dreamed of running her own marketing firm, had been living in hell while I'd been completely oblivious. Every family dinner where she'd worn long sleeves in summer. Every time she'd canceled plans at the last minute. Every forced smile at charity events where she'd stood beside Marcus like a perfect accessory. How long? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Based on what I'm seeing. At least 18 months, possibly longer. 18 months. A year and a half of suffering while I'd been patting myself on the back for being the tough detective who protected people. I'd failed the one person who mattered most. My phone buzzed. Captain Rodriguez, my boss at the precinct. Carter, I heard about Emma. I'm pulling you off active cases until this is resolved. You're too close to this. Captain, I can handle. Like hell you can. And before you even think about going rogue on this, remember that Marcus Whitfield has connections all the way to the state capitol. His investment firm manages portfolios for half the city council and 3 county judges. This has to be done by the book, or it won't stick. I understood what he wasn't saying. Marcus had money and influence. He could make problems disappear, including cops who got too aggressive in their investigations. But Captain Rodriguez didn't know what I'd learned during my years working domestic violence cases. Men like Marcus always made mistakes. They got overconfident, sloppy. They left trails. After hanging up, I walked to the hospital cafeteria and bought coffee that tasted like burned water. I sat by the window, watching the autumn leaves fall in the courtyard, and started making mental notes. Emma's marriage to Marcus had coincided with several changes in her behavior that I dismissed as normal newlywed adjustments. She'd quit her job at the marketing firm, saying Marcus wanted her to focus on their home. She'd stopped seeing most of her friends, claiming she was too busy with charity work. She'd moved from our modest family home to Marcus's mansion on the hill, physically and emotionally distancing herself from everyone who'd known her before. Classic isolation tactics. I'd seen it dozens of times in my cases, but I'd been blind to it in my own family. My personal phone rang. Unknown number. Detective Carter? This is Attorney James Morrison from Morrison, Webb and Associates. I represent Mr. Marcus Whitfield. I understand there's been an unfortunate accident involving his wife. Accident? I kept my voice level, professional. Mr. Whitfield is, of course, extremely concerned about Emma's well-being. He's currently out of town on business but will return immediately. In the meantime, he wants to ensure she receives the very best medical care. Money is no object. Out of town on business. How convenient. Where exactly is Mr. Whitfield? I asked. I believe he's in Chicago, meeting with clients. He should be back this evening. I thanked the lawyer and hung up, but something cold had settled in my stomach. Chicago was a 3-hour drive from Millbrook Valley. Easy to establish an alibi while having plenty of time to return home, hurt Emma, and get back for his business meeting. When I was finally allowed to see Emma, she was awake but groggy from pain medication. Her face was a roadmap of bruises, but her eyes were clear and focused on mine. Morgan, she whispered. I need to tell you something about Marcus. Something he doesn't know I found. She reached under her pillow with her good hand and pulled out a small USB drive. Financial records, she said. He's been stealing from his clients' accounts. Millions of dollars. I found the files on his computer last week. I stared at the drive, understanding flooding through me. That's why he tried to kill you. You found out about the embezzlement. Emma nodded weakly. He said if I ever told anyone, he'd make sure nobody would believe me. He said he'd destroy me completely. I closed my fingers around the USB drive, feeling its weight like a promise. He picked the wrong sister to threaten, I said quietly. The USB drive felt like a loaded weapon in my palm as I sat beside Emma's hospital bed. Outside her window, the sun was setting over Millbrook Valley, casting long shadows across the parking lot where Marcus would probably arrive soon, ready to play the grieving husband. The thought made my jaw clench so hard I could hear my teeth grinding. Emma, I need you to listen to me carefully, I said, leaning closer to her bed. I'm going to take this drive, and I'm going to use it to destroy him. But once I start down this path, there's no going back. Are you absolutely certain you want me to do this? Her swollen fingers found mine and squeezed with surprising strength. He told me that if I ever tried to leave him, he'd kill me and make it look like suicide. He said he knew how to make people disappear without anyone asking questions. Her voice was hoarse but steady. Morgan, I've been planning my own funeral for 6 months because I was too scared to fight back. That decided it. I slipped the drive into my jacket pocket and stood up. Then we fight back. But we do it smart, and we do it right. What are you going to do? What I do best, I said. Follow the money. I kissed her forehead gently, avoiding the bandaged areas. Get some rest. Don't tell anyone about the drive, not even the nurses. If Marcus shows up, you don't know anything about his business dealings. You were unconscious, remember? She nodded, and I could see the first spark of hope in her eyes since I'd found her in that ditch. The drive back to my apartment took me through downtown Millbrook Valley, past the pristine storefronts and manicured parks that made our town look like something from a postcard. But now I saw it differently. Every elegant building, every expensive car, every perfectly dressed couple walking into the country club, I wondered how much of it was built on Marcus's stolen money. My apartment was a modest two-bedroom place on Oak Street, nothing fancy but comfortable. The walls were lined with my police academy graduation photo, commendations, and family pictures from better times. I grabbed my laptop, a bottle of beer, and settled at my kitchen table to examine what Emma had risked her life to steal. The USB drive contained hundreds of files, spreadsheets, bank statements, investment records, and email chains dating back 3 years. As I scrolled through the data, a pattern emerged that made my detective instinct sing with recognition. Marcus hadn't just been skimming from client accounts, he'd been running a sophisticated Ponzi scheme, using new investors' money to pay returns to existing clients while funneling millions into offshore accounts under fake shell companies. The names on the client list read like a who's who of Millbrook Valley society. The Hendersons, who owned the largest farm in the county. Judge Patricia Caldwell, who'd presided over 3 of my domestic violence cases. Mayor William Tucker, whose campaign Marcus had heavily funded. Even Police Chief Brian Matthews, my own boss's boss, had invested his entire retirement fund with Whitfield Investment Services. This wasn't just embezzlement. This was a financial nuclear bomb that would destroy half the power structure in our town when it detonated. My phone rang. Marcus's name appeared on the caller ID. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message. Detective Carter, this is Marcus Whitfield. I just heard about Emma's terrible accident. I'm driving back from Chicago as fast as I can. I'm so worried about her. Please call me back immediately. His voice was perfect, just the right amount of panic and concern. If I didn't know better, I might have believed he was a loving husband desperate to reach his injured wife. But I did know better. I knew the difference between genuine emotion and a carefully rehearsed performance. I called my former partner, Detective Lisa Park, who now worked financial crimes for the state police. Morgan? Jesus, I heard about Emma. How is she? She'll live. Lisa, I need a favor, and I need you to not ask too many questions. Shoot. I'm going to email you some financial documents. I need you to run them through the federal database, see if any of the account numbers or shell companies pop up in other investigations. Morgan, please tell me you're not planning to go vigilante on your sister's husband. I'm planning to do my job. The fact that it's personal just means I'll do it better. There was a long pause. Send me the files. But Morgan? Be careful. Men with that kind of money don't just roll over when they're cornered. After hanging up, I spent the next 2 hours copying Emma's files to 3 separate encrypted drives. One went into my home safe, one into a safety deposit box at the bank, and one I mailed to myself at the precinct using overnight delivery. If Marcus thought he could make evidence disappear the way he tried to make Emma disappear, he was about to learn otherwise. At 10:30 p.m., my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Marcus Whitfield standing on my porch, still wearing his expensive suit, his perfectly styled hair slightly mussed as if he'd been running his hands through it with worry. He looked exactly like what he was supposed to be, a successful businessman devastated by his wife's accident. I opened the door with my service weapon clipped to my belt, clearly visible. Marcus. That was fast. Morgan, thank God. How is she? The hospital won't tell me anything over the phone, and visiting hours are over. I need to see her. She's sleeping. Doctor's orders. He stepped closer, and I caught a whiff of expensive cologne mixed with something else. Fear, maybe. Or guilt. I can't believe this happened. She must have been walking and slipped near the drainage ditch. The road gets so slippery when it rains. Walking. Interesting. I hadn't mentioned anything about her being found near a road. Actually, Marcus, we're treating this as an assault. Emma didn't slip. Someone beat her nearly to death and left her to die. For just a split second, his mask slipped. I saw calculation flash across his features before the concerned husband expression returned. An assault? Who would want to hurt Emma? She doesn't have any enemies. That's what I intend to find out, I said, watching his face carefully. Starting with her closest associates. People who knew her routine, her schedule. People who had access to her. Of course, anything I can do to help. Emma means everything to me. I smiled, the same smile I used on suspects who thought they were smarter than they were. I'm counting on it, Marcus. I'm counting on it. After he left, I double-checked my locks and drew the curtains. Tomorrow, the real investigation would begin. Tonight, I had a Ponzi scheme to decode and a would-be murderer to catch. Emma had been right about one thing, this was war. But Marcus had made a critical error in his calculations. He'd picked a fight with someone who knew how to win. The next morning, I arrived at the precinct at 6 a.m., 2 hours before my shift officially started. The building was nearly empty except for the night desk sergeant and a few patrol officers finishing their reports. Perfect. I needed time to work without Captain Rodriguez breathing down my neck about staying away from the Whitfield case. I settled into my desk with coffee that could strip paint and started making calls. If I was going to take down Marcus Whitfield, I needed allies, people with skills I didn't have and access to resources beyond what Millbrook Valley PD could provide. My first call went to Tommy Chen, a forensic accountant I'd worked with on the city council corruption case 2 years earlier. Tommy had left the FBI to start his own consulting firm in Detroit, specializing in white-collar crime investigations. Morgan Carter, he said, picking up on the second ring. I was wondering when you'd call. Heard through the grapevine that your sister got hurt. Tommy, I need your help. Unofficial help. The best kind. What have you got? I explained about the USB drive and the preliminary financial records I'd reviewed. Tommy listened without interrupting, occasionally making small sounds of interest that told me he was already seeing the patterns I'd missed. Ponzi scheme, definitely, he said when I finished. But what you're describing sounds more sophisticated than your typical small-town financial advisor gone bad. The offshore shell companies, the timing of the transfers, this guy knows what he's doing. Send me everything you've got. I'll run it through some analysis software that can trace fund movements across multiple jurisdictions. Tommy, this has to stay between us. The suspect has connections throughout local law enforcement. Understood. Morgan? Be careful. If this guy's as smart as you think, he'll have contingency plans. Exit strategies. Men like this don't usually leave loose ends. My second call went to Rachel Santos, an investigative reporter for the Detroit Free Press who'd helped expose the pyramid scheme that had targeted Millbrook Valley's elderly residents. Rachel was tenacious, ethical, and had sources throughout Michigan's financial sector. Detective Carter. How's small-town life treating you? It's gotten complicated, Rachel. I've got a story for you, but I need you to sit on it until I give you the green light. I'm listening. I gave her the basic outline without mentioning Emma's name or the assault. Just the financial crimes aspect, a local investment advisor potentially defrauding clients of millions of dollars. Holy shit, Morgan. You realize if this is as big as you think, it could be federal? SEC, FBI, maybe even Treasury involvement. That's what I'm hoping for. Local justice might not be enough this time. Send me what you can. I'll start making calls to my sources at the federal level. But Morgan, if you're thinking about going after this guy yourself, don't. Let the feds handle it. We'll see, I said, which made Rachel groan. That's exactly what I was afraid you'd say. My third call was the most important. Detective Maria Vasquez worked organized crime for the Michigan State Police and had a reputation for being absolutely fearless when it came to taking down powerful criminals. We'd met at a law enforcement conference 3 years earlier and had stayed in touch. Maria, it's Morgan Carter from Millbrook Valley. Morgan. How's life in Norman Rockwell land? Turns out Norman Rockwell had a dark side. I need someone I can trust, someone with access to federal databases and no connections to my local power structure. Sounds serious. What's going on? I explained about Emma's assault and the financial records, being careful to emphasize that I was building a legitimate case, not planning vigilante justice. Jesus, Morgan. Your sister okay? She will be. But this guy tried to kill her to cover up his crimes, and he's got half my town in his pocket. I need backup I can trust. You've got it. Send me everything you have. I'll run the names through NCIC, FinCEN, and see if any of these shell companies have popped up in other investigations. And Morgan? If this is as big as it sounds, I'm bringing in the FBI whether you like it or not. Good. I want this bastard in federal prison where his local connections can't reach him. By 9 a.m., I had my team assembled. Tommy would follow the money, Rachel would prepare the public exposure, and Maria would handle the federal coordination. Now I needed local intelligence, someone who knew Marcus's routines, his associates, his weaknesses. I drove to the Millbrook Valley Country Club, where Marcus played golf every Tuesday and Friday morning. The club manager, David Walsh, had been my high school guidance counselor before inheriting his family's membership and taking over the business. Morgan Carter, he said with genuine warmth when I walked into his office. How's Emma doing? We heard about the accident. She's recovering. David, I need to ask you some questions about Marcus Whitfield, and I need you to keep this conversation confidential. His expression grew serious. Is Marcus in some kind of trouble? Potentially. Has he seemed different lately? Stressed, distracted, any changes in his behavior? David leaned back in his chair, thinking. Actually, yes. The past few weeks, he's been very aggressive on the golf course. Throwing clubs, cursing at his caddy. Not like him at all. And he's been making a lot of phone calls during his rounds, which is against club policy. Any idea who he was calling? International numbers, from what I could overhear. Sounded like business calls, but urgent ones. And Morgan? He's been asking questions about the club's insurance policies, specifically about our liability coverage for member assets stored on the premises. That was interesting. Does Marcus store anything valuable here? He has one of our premium safe deposit boxes in the club vault. Pays extra for 24-hour access. I felt my pulse quicken. If Marcus was planning to disappear, he'd need access to cash, documents, maybe foreign currency. A safe deposit box at an exclusive country club would be perfect, secure, private, and completely off the official radar. David, I need you to do something for me, and it might get uncomfortable. What do you need? If Marcus comes in today, I want you to call me immediately. Don't approach him, don't let on that anything's different. Just call. Morgan, you're scaring me. Should I be worried about the safety of our members? Just call me if he shows up. I left the country club with another piece of the puzzle. Marcus was preparing for something, either a quick escape or a final cleanup operation. Either way, I needed to move fast. Back at the precinct, I found an envelope on my desk marked personal and confidential. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a message typed in block letters. Your sister should have minded her own business. So should you. I stared at the note, feeling ice form in my stomach. Marcus was escalating. The polite facade from last night was already cracking, and now he was resorting to direct threats. I photographed the note and immediately called Maria Vasquez. He's threatening you now, she said after I read her the message. Looks like it. That's good news, actually. Threatening a police officer is a federal crime. We can use this to get a warrant for his communications, his financial records, everything. How long will that take? If I call in some favors? 24 hours, maybe less. I looked at the note again, thinking about Emma lying in that hospital bed, thinking about Marcus's perfectly rehearsed performance of concern. Maria, I don't think we have 24 hours. Tommy Chin called me at 2:47 p.m., his voice tight with the kind of excitement that comes from uncovering something big and terrible. "Morgan, you need to sit down for this." I was already sitting in my car outside the hospital, having just finished my second visit with Emma. She was stronger today, more alert, but the fear in her eyes hadn't diminished. If anything, it had intensified when I told her about the threatening note. "Talk to me, Tommy. Your Marcus Whitfield isn't just running a local Ponzi scheme. The shell companies I traced? They connect to a network spanning 12 states and 3 countries. We're looking at a minimum of $47 million in stolen funds, but that's just what I can verify so far." I felt the blood drain from my face. 47 million? And counting. But here's the scary part, some of these offshore accounts have been receiving regular deposits from sources I can't identify. Clean money going in, dirty money coming out. "Morgan, I think your guy is laundering money for someone else. Someone big." My hands tightened on the steering wheel. "How big are we talking?" "The kind of big that has its own enforcement arm." I found transaction records that suggest payments to security firms, private military contractors, people who specialize in making problems disappear permanently. The threatening note suddenly felt like a gentle warning compared to what Tommy was describing. "You're saying Marcus has access to professional killers?" "I'm saying he's been paying people who provide those services. Whether for his own protection or to handle loose ends, I can't tell from the financial data alone." I closed my eyes, thinking about Emma's whispered words. He said he knew how to make people disappear. It hadn't been an idle threat. It had been a statement of capability. "Tommy, send me everything you found. I need to get this to federal authorities immediately." "Already done. I've also forwarded copies to that state police detective you mentioned." "Morgan, you need to understand something. If Marcus suspects that you're closing in on him, you're not just dealing with one desperate man anymore. You're potentially dealing with an entire criminal network that has a lot to lose." After hanging up, I sat in the hospital parking lot, watching normal people go about their normal lives, completely unaware that their peaceful little town was built on a foundation of stolen money and violence. Nurses changing shifts, families visiting loved ones, elderly couples walking slowly through the garden, all of it suddenly felt fragile, like a soap bubble that could pop at any moment. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel Santos. "Found something. Check your email. Call me ASAP." I opened her message on my phone. The subject line read, "Your boy's been busy." The email contained links to news articles from other states. Investment advisor flees after client funds go missing, from Ohio. Ponzi scheme collapse leaves hundreds broke, from Indiana. Financial advisor vanishes. Police seek whereabouts, from Pennsylvania. Different names, different companies, but the photographs were unmistakably Marcus Whitfield with various haircuts and fake identification documents. Rachel answered on the first ring. "Morgan, your Marcus Whitfield has been playing this game for at least 8 years. He sets up shop in small, wealthy communities, builds trust with local elite, runs his scheme for 2 to 3 years, then disappears before anyone catches on. Millbrook Valley is just his latest hunting ground." Jesus Christ. How many people has he robbed? Based on what I can verify, over 300 families across 6 states. We're talking about college funds, retirement savings, medical emergency funds. He's destroyed entire lifelines. And Morgan, there's something else. In 2 of the previous cases, people who got too close to discovering his identity ended up dead. Ruled as accidents, but the timing was suspicious. I felt like I was falling down a well that had no bottom. What kind of accidents? Car crash in Ohio, apparent suicide in Pennsylvania. Both victims had been asking questions about their missing investments just days before they died. "Rachel, I need you to contact the FBI immediately. This is way beyond what local or even state police can handle." "Already done. I've got a contact at the Detroit field office who specializes in financial crimes. Agent Sarah Kim. She's expecting your call." I was about to respond when I saw Marcus's black Mercedes pull into the hospital parking lot. He stepped out wearing a different suit but the same perfectly arranged expression of concern. This time, however, I noticed something I'd missed before, a slight bulge under his left armpit that suggested a shoulder holster. Marcus Whitfield was armed. I ended the call with Rachel and immediately dialed 911. This is Detective Morgan Carter, badge number 4-7-9-1. I need uniform backup at Millbrook Valley General Hospital immediately. Potentially armed suspect approaching a victim. The dispatcher confirmed units were en route, but I knew they were at least 10 minutes away. I got out of my car and intercepted Marcus halfway across the parking lot. Marcus. Back to visit Emma? He turned, and for a split second, I saw something predatory flash across his features before the concerned husband mask slipped back into place. Detective Carter. Yes, I couldn't sleep knowing she was here alone. How is she today? Better. Much more alert. Her memory's coming back. I watched his face carefully. A muscle in his jaw twitched, just once, but it was enough. That's wonderful news. I'm sure she's eager to put this terrible accident behind her. Actually, she's been talking quite a bit. About all sorts of things. Her work, your business, some interesting files she found on your computer. Marcus went very still. When he spoke again, his voice had lost its warmth. Detective, I hope you're not suggesting that Emma's traumatic injuries have somehow made her confused about our private affairs. Not confused at all. In fact, she's been remarkably clear about everything she remembers. I heard sirens in the distance, growing closer. Marcus heard them too. His hand moved slightly toward his jacket, then stopped. I think there's been a misunderstanding, he said carefully. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. Oh, we'll definitely be discussing this. Just not here, and not alone. The first patrol car pulled into the parking lot, followed immediately by a second. Marcus's expression hardened into something I recognized from interrogation rooms, the look of a cornered predator calculating his options. Detective Carter, he said quietly, you have no idea what you're interfering with. This is much bigger than your sister, bigger than this town. There are people involved who don't appreciate complications. Then they're going to really hate what comes next. As the uniformed officers approached, I realized that everything I thought I knew about this case had been wrong. Emma's assault wasn't just domestic violence. Marcus wasn't just a local criminal. We were dealing with something that reached far beyond Millbrook Valley's borders, something with tentacles that stretched into other states, other victims, other crimes. And somewhere in that network of stolen money and disappeared people, Marcus Whitfield had made the mistake of thinking he could destroy my family and walk away clean. He was about to learn exactly how wrong he'd been. The confrontation in the hospital parking lot ended with Marcus being escorted away by uniformed officers, but not arrested. Without concrete evidence of an immediate crime, we could only hold him for questioning. Captain Rodriguez made that crystal clear when he called me into his office an hour later. Carter, what the hell were you thinking, confronting a suspect without backup? I had backup. I called for units. After you'd already engaged with an armed suspect. Jesus, Morgan, if this goes sideways, it's my ass on the line too. I set the threatening note on his desk. He's escalating, Captain. This morning it was veiled threats. This afternoon he shows up at the hospital armed while my sister's lying helpless in a bed. Rodriguez studied the note, his expression grim. We'll dust it for prints, but I doubt we'll find anything useful. Men like Whitfield don't usually make amateur mistakes. Captain, there's something else. I've been working with federal contacts to trace his financial activities. This isn't just local embezzlement. We're looking at a multi-state operation involving tens of millions of dollars. Rodriguez leaned back in his chair, suddenly looking older than his 55 years. Morgan, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I need a direct answer. How deep into this are you planning to go? As deep as it takes. That's what I was afraid of. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a manila folder. I've been getting calls all day. The mayor's office, 3 city council members, Judge Caldwell, even Police Chief Matthews. All of them very concerned about unsubstantiated allegations against Marcus Whitfield. I felt ice forming in my stomach. They're protecting him. They're protecting their investments. Half the people running this town have money tied up with Whitfield's firm. If he goes down, he takes them with him. Captain, if those investments are built on stolen money, then they're victims too, and they'll fight like hell to avoid admitting it. Rodriguez closed the folder. Morgan, I'm officially ordering you to step back from this investigation. Transfer everything you have to the state police and let them handle it. And if I refuse? Then I'll suspend you. With pay, but still suspended. And that helps no one. I stared at him for a long moment, recognizing the impossible position he was in. Rodriguez was a good cop, but he was also a political appointee who served at the pleasure of the same people who were now circling their wagons around Marcus. Understood, Captain. I'll transfer my files to Detective Vasquez this afternoon. Good. And Morgan? Be careful. Men with that kind of money and connections don't just disappear quietly when cornered. They fight back. I left his office knowing that I was officially off the case but unofficially more committed than ever. If the local power structure was going to protect Marcus, then I'd have to work around them entirely. Back at my desk, I found my computer had been remotely accessed. The login logs showed someone had attempted to view my case files at 3:17 p.m., right around the time I'd been confronting Marcus in the parking lot. The attempt had been blocked by our security protocols, but the message was clear: they were trying to see what I knew. My personal cell phone rang. Maria Vasquez. Morgan, we've got problems. I just got a call from the FBI field office in Detroit. Someone with serious juice has been making inquiries about our investigation. They're asking questions about evidence, witnesses, timelines. What kind of someone? The kind that has the authority to make federal investigations disappear into bureaucratic black holes. The agent I spoke with suggested we might want to accelerate our timeline. How accelerated? Like, maybe we should consider moving Emma to a secure location tonight. The words hit me like a physical blow. You think they'll go after her again? I think Marcus has resources we haven't fully identified yet, and desperate people with unlimited funds can be very creative about solving their problems. I was already grabbing my jacket. I'm heading to the hospital now. Morgan, wait. Don't go alone. If they're watching the hospital, then I'll deal with it. The drive to the hospital felt like the longest 5 minutes of my life. Every car that pulled behind me could be a threat. Every shadow in the parking lot could be hiding someone with orders to ensure Emma never testified about what she'd found. I parked as close to the main entrance as possible and took the stairs to Emma's floor, avoiding the elevator where I could be trapped. The hallway was quiet, almost too quiet for a busy hospital. Emma's room was empty. I felt my world tilt sideways as I stared at the neatly made bed, the absence of personal items, the complete lack of any indication that my sister had ever been there. I grabbed the first nurse I saw. Where's Emma Whitfield? Room 314. Oh, she was transferred about an hour ago. Her husband came with the paperwork from her doctor. Said they were moving her to a private facility in Grand Rapids for specialized care. What husband? Marcus Whitfield? The nurse nodded. Such a devoted man. He was so worried about her getting the best possible treatment. I felt like I was drowning in ice water. What kind of paperwork? Medical transfer orders, signed by Dr. Hendricks. Insurance authorization, discharge instructions. Everything looked proper. But it wasn't proper. I knew Dr. Hendricks personally, and she would never have authorized Emma's transfer without consulting with me first. Someone had forged the paperwork, and that someone had just walked out of the hospital with my sister. I called Maria immediately. They took her. Marcus has Emma. What? How is that possible? Forged transfer orders. Professional job, looked completely legitimate to the staff. Morgan, listen to me carefully. Don't try to handle this alone. We need to coordinate with. My phone beeped with an incoming text from an unknown number, Your sister is safe for now. Stop the investigation and she stays that way. Continue digging and she disappears permanently. You have 24 hours to destroy all evidence and convince your federal friends to look elsewhere. Choose wisely. I showed the message to the nurse, who went pale. Oh my God, should I call security? No, I said, my voice deadly calm. You should call the FBI. As I walked back to my car, I realized that everything had changed. This wasn't just about financial crimes anymore. It wasn't even about attempted murder. Marcus had just committed kidnapping across state lines, which made it a federal offense punishable by life in prison. But more importantly, he'd just made it personal in a way that he clearly didn't understand. I'd spent 15 years learning how to hunt people who thought they were smarter than the law. I'd tracked down killers, thieves, and predators who believed their money or connections made them untouchable. Marcus Whitfield was about to discover that kidnapping a cop's sister was the kind of mistake you only make once. The war was no longer coming. It had arrived. The next 12 hours became a nightmare of federal bureaucracy, jurisdictional disputes, and dead ends that felt deliberately constructed to waste time while Emma remained missing. I sat in the FBI field office in Detroit at 3 a.m., watching Agent Sarah Kim pace behind her desk while 3 different agencies argued over who had primary jurisdiction. Kidnapping across state lines is definitely federal, Agent Kim said into her phone for the 4th time. No, I don't care what the local prosecutor thinks about stepping on toes. We have a missing victim and credible threats. But even as she fought the bureaucratic battles, I could see the frustration in her eyes. Marcus hadn't just disappeared with Emma, he'd vanished completely. His house was empty, his office cleared out, his personal vehicles abandoned in long-term parking at Detroit Metro Airport. Whatever exit strategy he'd planned, he'd executed it flawlessly. Tommy Chen had been working around the clock to trace financial movements, but every lead ended in encrypted offshore accounts or shell companies that existed only on paper. It's like watching a magic trick, he told me over a secure video call. The money's there 1 minute, gone the next, bouncing through 6 different countries before disappearing into digital ghost accounts. Maria Vasquez joined us at dawn, bringing coffee and grim news from the state police investigation. We've got surveillance footage from the hospital, but it's not helpful. Marcus came in through a service entrance, used employee corridors to avoid the main security cameras. Whoever planned this knew the hospital's layout intimately. Someone on the inside, I said, the words tasting like poison. He had help from hospital staff. Looks that way. We're running background checks on everyone who had access to patient transfer protocols, but it's going to take time. Time we didn't have. The 24-hour deadline for Marcus's text was approaching fast, and I was no closer to finding Emma than I'd been when she first vanished. Agent Kim ended her call and turned to us. I've got authorization for a multi-state manhunt, but there's a problem. Someone with significant influence has been making calls to Washington. Calls suggesting that this investigation is based on personal vendetta rather than solid evidence. I felt my blood pressure spike. What kind of calls? The kind that come from people who donate heavily to political campaigns. The kind that suggest Detective Carter might be emotionally compromised and pursuing an innocent businessman based on family drama rather than facts. That's bullshit and you know it. I know it, but my supervisor's supervisor is getting pressure to reassign this case to a team with no personal connections to the victim. The room went silent. Outside the conference room windows, Detroit was waking up to another normal day while my world collapsed around me. How long do I have? I asked quietly. Officially? You're off the case as of this morning. Unofficially? I didn't see you leave this room. That's when my personal phone rang. Dr. Sarah Hendricks from the hospital. Morgan, I need to see you immediately. Not at the hospital, somewhere private. I found something, and I think I know why Emma was really taken. We met at a diner outside the city, the kind of place where conversations disappeared into the clatter of dishes and the hum of highway traffic. Sarah looked like she hadn't slept in days, her usually perfect hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, her hands shaking as she stirred sugar into coffee she wasn't drinking. I should have seen it earlier, she said without preamble. The transfer orders that were used to take Emma, they weren't just forged. They were perfect forgeries. Too perfect. What do you mean? The signatures, the medical codes, even the insurance authorization numbers, everything was exactly right. The only way someone could forge documents that accurately is if they had access to our internal systems. I felt a chill run down my spine. Someone from inside the hospital helped him. Not just helped him. Someone with administrative access, someone who knew our protocols intimately. Sarah pulled a flash drive from her purse. I spent all night going through our computer logs. Morgan, someone's been accessing Emma's medical records for weeks. Long before her assault. Who? That's the problem. The access came from an administrator account, but the login times don't match any of our actual administrator's schedules. Someone's been using stolen credentials. I plugged the drive into my laptop, scrolling through pages of access logs that meant nothing to me but clearly terrified Sarah. Here, she said, pointing to a series of entries. These accesses happened at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., times when no legitimate administrator would be in the system. Someone was monitoring Emma's condition, her treatment schedule, her visitor logs. They were planning the kidnapping from the moment she was admitted. It gets worse. Look at these records. Sarah clicked to another screen. The same unauthorized access pattern appears on 12 other patient files over the past 6 months. All domestic violence cases. All women who were brought in with suspicious injuries. The magnitude of what she was showing me hit like a physical blow. Marcus has been using someone inside the hospital to track abuse victims. To track potential witnesses, Morgan. Think about it, what if Emma wasn't the first woman to discover his financial crimes? What if there were others, other wives or girlfriends who found evidence and ended up in the hospital? My hands were shaking as I scrolled through the patient names, cross-referencing them against missing persons reports in my memory. 3 of the names were familiar, women who'd been reported missing after being treated for suspicious injuries, cases that had gone cold when leads dried up. Sarah, we need to get this to the FBI immediately. I can't. If I officially report this, I'll be fired and probably sued for violation of patient privacy laws. The hospital administration has already made it clear that any employee who cooperates with investigations against Marcus Whitfield will face immediate termination. They're protecting him even now? Morgan, Marcus Whitfield's investment firm, handles the hospital's pension fund. $30 million in employee retirement money. If he goes down, so does everyone's future. I stared at the screen, understanding finally dawning on me. This wasn't just about one man's crimes or even one town's corruption. Marcus had systematically infiltrated every institution that could protect his victims, the police through political connections, the hospital through financial control, the courts through invested judges. Emma hadn't just stumbled onto a Ponzi scheme. She'd uncovered a predator who'd turned an entire community into his hunting ground, using their own money and trust against them. And now he had her somewhere, probably planning to make her disappear permanently like the others. My phone buzzed with another text. Time's running out, detective. Your federal friends are asking too many questions. Make them stop, or your sister joins the others who couldn't keep their mouths shut. I showed the message to Sarah, who went white. Morgan, what others? How many women has he killed? I didn't answer, because I was finally understanding the true scope of what we were facing. Marcus wasn't just a financial criminal who'd escalated to violence. He was a serial killer who'd been operating under everyone's noses for years, using his legitimate business as cover for hunting and eliminating anyone who threatened to expose him. And I was running out of time to save the most important person in my life. I left the diner with Sarah's flash drive and a terrible clarity about what I needed to do. The federal investigation was being systematically dismantled by political pressure, the local authorities were compromised, and traditional law enforcement channels were failing Emma when she needed them most. But Marcus had made one critical error in his calculations. He'd underestimated what a desperate sister with 15 years of police training was capable of when the system failed. I drove to a storage unit facility on the outskirts of Millbrook Valley, one I'd rented under a fake name 6 months earlier when I'd started keeping backup evidence from sensitive cases. Inside, I opened a metal cabinet that contained equipment I'd never thought I'd use again: surveillance gear, encrypted communications devices, and a few items that weren't exactly standard police issue. My phone rang. Tommy Chen. Morgan, I've been running financial traces all night, and I think I found something. Marcus hasn't just been moving money, he's been preparing a permanent exit strategy. I tracked payments to a property management company in the Cayman Islands, monthly transfers for what looks like a private compound. How long has he been planning this? Based on the payment history? At least 3 years. This isn't a panic move, Morgan. This is a carefully orchestrated disappearance plan, and he's had practice. What do you mean, practice? I cross-referenced the timeline with his previous identities. Every time he's pulled this vanishing act before, he's made similar payments to offshore properties just months before the local schemes collapsed. He's done this before, and he's gotten away with it every time. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Tommy, if he's following the same pattern as before, what happens to the people who could identify him? There was a long pause. Morgan, in the previous cases, key witnesses either disappeared or died in accidents before trials could begin. I closed my eyes, understanding finally clicking into place. Marcus wasn't planning to kill Emma quickly. He was going to keep her alive until he could eliminate everyone else who posed a threat: me, Sarah, the federal investigators, anyone with evidence of his crimes. Then he'd disappear permanently, leaving behind a trail of bodies and no one left to testify against him. Tommy, I need you to do something for me, and you can't ask questions. Shoot. I need you to create a digital dead man's switch. Something that will automatically release all our evidence to every major news outlet and federal agency if I don't check in every 12 hours. Jesus, Morgan. What are you planning? What I should have done from the beginning. Fighting fire with fire. I ended the call and started assembling equipment. If Marcus wanted to play outside the rules of civilized society, then I'd meet him on his own terms. But first, I needed to find out where he was keeping Emma. An hour later, I was parked outside the Millbrook Valley Country Club, watching David Walsh lock up his office for the evening. I intercepted him in the parking lot. David, I need access to Marcus's safe deposit box. His face went pale. Morgan, you know I can't do that. It's against club policy, probably illegal. David, Marcus kidnapped my sister. He's probably going to kill her unless I find where he's hiding her. That safe deposit box might contain information about his properties, his escape routes, something that could save her life. I could lose my job, my membership, everything. I pulled out my phone and showed him the photo I'd taken of the threatening note. This is what he sent me yesterday. David, he's not coming back to Millbrook Valley. His membership fees are the least of your concerns. David stared at the note for a long moment, then looked back at me. If anyone finds out I let you in there. No one will find out. You were never here tonight. 20 minutes later, we were standing in the climate-controlled vault beneath the country club, surrounded by the accumulated secrets of Millbrook Valley's elite. Marcus's safe deposit box was larger than most, nearly the size of a filing cabinet drawer. Inside, I found exactly what I'd hoped for: property deeds, vehicle registrations, and detailed maps of 3 different properties in remote locations. One in northern Michigan, one in the Canadian wilderness, and one on a private island in the Caribbean. Each property was equipped with landing strips, boat docks, and what the architectural plans described as security facilities. But it was the 4th item that made my blood run cold: a leather-bound journal containing detailed entries about his previous victims. Names, photographs, descriptions of their deaths made to look like accidents. 12 women over 8 years, all who'd discovered his financial crimes and tried to expose him. Emma's photograph was pasted on the most recent page, along with mine. Underneath our pictures, he'd written a single word: next. I photographed everything with my phone, then carefully returned the items to the box. David watched nervously as I worked. Did you find what you needed? More than I needed. I handed him a business card. David, if anyone comes asking about tonight, you give them this number and tell them Detective Carter said to call immediately. The card belonged to Agent Kim at the FBI. Whatever happened next, I wanted someone to know where the evidence trail led. Back in my car, I studied the property maps and made my decision. The Michigan property was closest, only 4 hours away, and the journal entries suggested it was his preferred location for resolving problems. If Emma was still alive, that's where she'd be. I called Maria Vasquez. I found him. Or at least, I found where he's keeping Emma. Morgan, please tell me you're not planning to go in alone. I'm planning to get my sister back. Everything else is negotiable. Give me the location. I'll coordinate with the feds, get you proper backup. Maria, by the time federal agents get warrants and coordinate jurisdictions, Emma will be dead. You know it, and I know it. There was a long silence. What do you need from me? Communication relay. If I don't check in every hour starting at midnight, send everything we have to every news outlet and federal agency simultaneously. Don't let this bastard disappear into the night. Morgan. Promise me. I promise. But Morgan? Come back alive. Emma needs her sister, not a martyr. I ended the call and started driving north, following back roads toward the property Marcus had prepared for situations exactly like this. The journal had been very specific about his methods. He liked to take his time with people who threatened him, making their deaths look like accidents or suicides after extracting information about what evidence they might have shared. Emma had been missing for 36 hours. If Marcus was following his usual pattern, I still had time. But not much. As I drove through the darkness toward whatever trap Marcus had prepared, I realized that everything in my life had led to this moment. 15 years of police work, all the criminals I'd caught, all the victims I'd protected, it had all been preparation for the most important case I'd ever work. The case where failure wasn't just a professional disappointment. It was a death sentence for the person I loved most in the world. The GPS led me down increasingly narrow roads until I was driving on gravel, then dirt, following a path that seemed designed to discourage casual visitors. Marcus's property was deep in the Michigan wilderness, surrounded by dense forest that would muffle any sounds and hide any evidence of what happened there. I parked my car half a mile from the coordinates I'd found in his safe deposit box, hidden behind a stand of pine trees where it wouldn't be visible from the main compound. The night was moonless, which worked in my favor as I approached on foot, using the tactical movement training I'd learned during my early years in patrol. Through my night vision scope, I could see the property layout matched the architectural plans exactly. A main lodge built to look like a rustic hunting cabin, but the reinforced windows and steel doors told a different story. Behind it, a smaller building that the plans had labeled as a guest house, but which had the unmistakable features of a holding facility: no windows, single entrance, soundproof construction. That's where Emma would be. 2 vehicles were parked near the main lodge, Marcus's black Mercedes and a white panel van with no markings. The van concerned me. It suggested Marcus wasn't working alone anymore. The journal entries had mentioned associates, who helped with his more difficult problems. I circled the perimeter, counting at least 3 men moving around the property with the practiced alertness of professional security. Not local thugs or desperate accomplices, but trained operatives who knew how to handle weapons and watch for threats. This wasn't going to be a simple rescue operation. This was going to be a war. I retreated to a ridge overlooking the compound and called the number Agent Kim had given me for emergencies. Agent Kim, this is Detective Carter. I've located the suspect's property and confirmed presence of the victim. I need immediate federal backup. Detective, where exactly are you? I gave her the coordinates. Multiple armed suspects, professionally trained. This isn't something I can handle alone. Morgan, listen to me carefully. We've been monitoring federal communications all evening. Someone's been intercepting our radio traffic, probably using the same channels. If we coordinate a raid, they'll know we're coming before we get within 10 miles. My blood ran cold. How is that possible? Marcus has connections we're still uncovering. Former military contractors, ex-federal agents, people with access to law enforcement frequencies and protocols. The bastard's been planning this for years. I closed my eyes, understanding the full scope of what I was facing. Marcus hadn't just built a financial empire, he'd assembled a private army with the skills and equipment to outmaneuver traditional law enforcement. Agent Kim, if you can't get back up here without compromising the operation, then I'm going in alone. Detective, that's suicide. Even if you could get to your sister, you'd never get both of you out alive against that kind of opposition. Then I guess I better make sure they don't see me coming. I ended the call and started preparing. In my equipment bag, I had flashbang grenades, smoke canisters, and enough firepower to handle multiple targets if I could catch them by surprise. The key would be speed and confusion: get in, get Emma, and get out before they could organize a coordinated response. But first, I needed to create a distraction. I worked my way around to the far side of the property, where a propane tank supplied the main lodge. The tank was large enough to create a significant explosion if properly ignited, and far enough from the holding facility to avoid injuring Emma while drawing attention away from her location. I attached a small incendiary device to the tank's valve system, set on a 15-minute delay. That would give me time to reach the guest house before the explosion drew every guard to the opposite side of the compound. 14 minutes later, I was crouched outside the windowless building where Emma was being held. Through the steel door, I could hear voices, Marcus talking to someone, his tone casual but urgent. The federal investigation is falling apart, but the sister's still a problem. She's been sharing information with too many people. After tonight, that won't matter. Another voice, unfamiliar, responded, "What about the woman? She's seen our faces, heard our names. She'll have an accident during the escape attempt. Very tragic. Devoted sister dies trying to rescue beloved sibling from kidnappers. The media will eat it up." 13 minutes. I checked my weapons one final time, counting rounds and positioning extra magazines where I could reach them quickly. Whatever happened in the next few minutes would determine whether Emma and I both went home or whether Marcus Whitfield added 2 more names to his journal. 12 minutes. I could hear movement inside the building, footsteps on concrete floors. Multiple voices now, discussing timing and logistics with the matter-of-fact tone of people who'd done this before. The explosion, when it came, lit up the night sky like a second sun. The blast was bigger than I'd expected, powerful enough to shatter windows in the main lodge and send a fireball 50 feet into the air. Shouts erupted from around the compound as guards ran toward the flames, exactly as I'd planned. I gave them 30 seconds to clear the area, then kicked in the door to the holding facility with my weapon raised. Inside, I found Marcus standing over Emma, who was zip-tied to a metal chair but conscious and alert. His hand was on her shoulder, and I could see the barrel of a pistol pressed against her temple. "Detective Carter," he said calmly, as if we'd run into each other at a coffee shop. "Right on time." Emma's eyes met mine, and I saw no fear there, only determination. Even tied up, even with a gun to her head, she was still fighting. "Let her go, Marcus. This is between you and me." He smiled, the same charming expression he'd worn at charity dinners and golf tournaments. "Oh, but detective, this was always about her. You see, Emma didn't just find my financial records. She copied them. And then she was clever enough to hide backup copies where I couldn't find them. The USB drive was everything she found." "No, detective. The USB drive was everything she wanted you to find. The real evidence, the names of my associates, the locations of my other properties, the complete list of my previous victims, that's hidden somewhere else. And Emma's going to tell me where before this night is over." I kept my weapon trained on Marcus, but he was using Emma as a perfect human shield. Any shot I took would risk hitting her. "What do you want, Marcus?" "Simple. Drop your weapon, call off your federal friends, and Emma lives long enough to give me what I need. Refuse, and I pull this trigger right now." In the distance, I could hear vehicles approaching. Marcus's associates, returning from investigating the explosion. In seconds, I'd be outnumbered and outgunned. Emma looked at me and mouthed 2 words, "Trust me." Then she did something that would haunt my dreams for years afterward. She smiled at Marcus and said, "You want to know where I hid the real evidence? I'll tell you. But first, you have to prove you're smart enough to deserve it. Marcus's grip on the pistol shifted slightly as his attention focused on her words. It was the opening I'd been waiting for. Emma's distraction lasted exactly 3 seconds, but 3 seconds was all I needed. As Marcus leaned forward, momentarily focused on her words about hidden evidence, I took the shot. The bullet caught him in the shoulder, spinning him away from Emma and sending his pistol clattering across the concrete floor. He hit the wall hard, blood spreading across his expensive shirt, his face twisted with shock and rage. "You bitch," he screamed at Emma, clutching his wounded shoulder. "You think this changes anything? My people will hunt you down, both of you. You'll never be safe." I kept my weapon trained on him while I moved to cut Emma's restraints with my tactical knife. "Your people are going to be too busy saving themselves to worry about hunting anyone." "What do you mean?" Marcus's voice had lost its smooth confidence, replaced by something raw and desperate. Emma rubbed her wrists where the zip ties had cut into her skin, then picked up Marcus's dropped pistol with steady hands. "While you were busy planning my kidnapping, I was busy planning your destruction." She pulled a small device from her pocket, a modified cell phone with an extended antenna. "This has been broadcasting our entire conversation to a live stream that's been running for the past hour. Every word you said about your previous victims, your associates, your plans to kill us, it's all being recorded and transmitted to servers in 12 different countries." Marcus's face went white. "That's impossible. We've been jamming all cellular signals in this area." "Your people have been jamming standard cellular frequencies," I said, understanding Emma's plan. "But my sister's always been smarter than people give her credit for. She built a device that broadcasts on emergency service frequencies that can't be jammed without violating federal law." Emma smiled grimly. "While you thought you were so clever, manipulating local authorities and federal investigations, I was working with Detective Carter's contacts to set up something you couldn't control or corrupt. A live broadcast that's been watched by over 10,000 people in the past hour, including federal agents, news reporters, and cybersecurity experts who've been documenting everything for evidence." The sound of vehicles outside was getting louder. Through the open door, I could see lights approaching, not the random flashlights of Marcus's associates, but the organized, professional lighting of a federal raid. "Agent Kim," I said into my radio. "Target secured. 1 wounded suspect in custody, victim safe." "Copy that, Detective Carter. We've got the perimeter surrounded." "Outstanding work." Marcus slumped against the wall, blood seeping between his fingers. "You don't understand what you've done. The people I work with, the network I'm part of, they won't just let this slide. They'll eliminate everyone connected to this investigation." "Actually, Marcus," Emma said, checking her broadcasting device, "they're probably more concerned with eliminating you right now. See, the live stream didn't just capture your confession. It also recorded you discussing your associates, their names, their methods, their other operations. You've just burned down your entire network on international television." I heard footsteps in the doorway and turned to see Agent Kim entering with a full tactical team. "Detective Carter, are you injured?" "No, but our suspect needs medical attention before he bleeds out. Wouldn't want him to miss his trial." As paramedics worked on Marcus's shoulder, Agent Kim approached Emma and me. "Ms. Whitfield, that was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Broadcasting your location while in the hands of armed criminals could have gotten you killed." "Detective Carter taught me something years ago," Emma said, looking at me with gratitude and exhaustion. "Sometimes the best defense is making sure everyone's watching. Hard to make people disappear when the whole world knows where they are." The next few hours passed in a blur of evidence collection, medical examinations, and preliminary statements. Marcus was stabilized and transported under heavy guard to a federal medical facility in Detroit. His associates, caught completely off guard by the federal raid, surrendered without significant resistance. But it was what happened in the days following that truly demonstrated the scope of Emma's plan. The live stream had been archived and distributed through social media faster than any government agency could contain it. Within 12 hours, major news networks were running Marcus's confession on continuous loop. Within 24 hours, federal investigations had been opened in 6 states based on the names and operations he'd revealed during his desperate attempt to intimidate us. Tommy Chin called me 3 days later with an update that brought the first genuine smile I'd had in weeks. "Morgan, the financial trail Marcus exposed during that broadcast? It's led to arrests in 4 states and 2 countries. The entire network is collapsing because he couldn't keep his mouth shut when he thought he was winning." "What about the other victims? The women from his journal?" "That's the beautiful part. The families of the women who supposedly died in accidents are now demanding investigations based on Marcus's own confession. 3 cases have already been reopened as homicides. Emma had spent 2 days in the hospital for observation, but physically she was recovering well. Emotionally, she was stronger than I'd expected. The night before Marcus's preliminary hearing, she visited me at my apartment. "I keep thinking about what would have happened if you hadn't found me in that ditch," she said, sitting at my kitchen table with tea I'd made too strong. "You would have found another way to survive. You always do." "No, Morgan. I mean, what would have happened to his next victims? How many more women would have died if we hadn't stopped him?" I didn't have an answer for that, because the truth was too horrifying to think about. Marcus had been escalating, becoming more bold and more violent with each iteration of his scheme. If we hadn't caught him when we did, the body count would have continued to grow. The important thing is we did stop him. You stopped him. The evidence you gathered, the plan you executed, that was all you, Emma. She shook her head. We stopped him. Family, remember? 2 weeks later, Marcus Whitfield was indicted on 43 federal charges including kidnapping, murder, wire fraud, racketeering, and terrorism. His bail was denied after the judge watched portions of the live stream confession. The trial wouldn't begin for months, but the outcome was never in doubt. Marcus had provided the most comprehensive confession in criminal justice history, broadcast live to an international audience and archived in multiple jurisdictions. Justice, it turned out, looked exactly like a man destroying himself with his own words while the whole world watched. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of Emma's new house on Birch Street, watching her teach our neighbor's daughter how to make chocolate chip cookies. The house was smaller than the mansion she'd shared with Marcus, but it had something the other place never did: it felt like home. The physical scars had faded. The broken ribs had healed, the bruises had disappeared, and even the psychological trauma was becoming manageable with the help of Dr. Patricia Wells, a therapist who specialized in survivors of domestic violence. But the real healing had come from something else entirely: purpose. "Morgan, hand me that mixing bowl," Emma called out, flour streaking her apron. 8-year-old Sophie Martinez stood on a step stool beside her, carefully measuring vanilla extract with the intense concentration only children possess. "My mom says you're a hero," Sophie announced to Emma, not looking up from her measuring cup. Emma smiled, the kind of genuine smile I hadn't seen from her in years. "Your mom's very kind, but heroes are people who save lives." I just told the truth. "Same thing sometimes," I said, settling into a chair at the kitchen table where I'd been reviewing grant applications for the foundation Emma had started with a portion of the recovered money from Marcus's schemes. The Emma Whitfield Foundation for Financial Crime Victims had already helped 43 families rebuild their lives after being defrauded by various investment scams. Emma insisted on keeping Marcus's last name for the foundation, saying it was important that his legacy be redemption rather than destruction. "People need to know that survivors can become something more than their trauma," she'd explained when setting up the organization. Marcus thought destroying me would be his greatest victory. Instead, it became the catalyst for helping hundreds of other people he never even met. The foundation operated out of a modest office in downtown Millbrook Valley, in a building that had once housed one of Marcus's shell companies. Emma found a certain poetic justice in transforming his instruments of deception into tools for healing. My own life had changed dramatically as well. The publicity from the case had led to job offers from federal agencies and major metropolitan police departments, but I'd chosen to stay in Millbrook Valley. The town needed rebuilding after the corruption network was exposed, and I'd been promoted to detective captain, overseeing a new financial crimes unit that worked directly with federal agencies. The unit had already broken up 2 additional investment fraud schemes and helped recover over $12 million for victims across 3 states. Apparently, Marcus's network had been larger than even we'd initially understood, but his detailed confession had provided a roadmap for dismantling every piece of it. "Aunt Morgan, are you coming to Emma's speech tomorrow?" Sophie asked, using the honorary title Emma had taught her. "Wouldn't miss it," I said. Emma was being honored at the National Domestic Violence Awareness Conference, receiving an award for her innovative approach to survivor advocacy. Her speech would be broadcast live to audiences in 14 countries. "I'm nervous," Emma admitted, wiping her hands on her apron. "Speaking to 5,000 people about the worst experience of your life isn't exactly comfortable." "You spoke to 10,000 people live on the internet while tied to a chair with a gun to your head," I pointed out. "I think you can handle a podium and a microphone." She laughed, and the sound still amazed me. 6 months ago, I'd found her broken and bleeding in a ditch, whispering barely audible words about her husband's betrayal. Now she was teaching children to bake cookies and preparing to address an international conference about turning survival into strength. The timer chimed, and Sophie clapped her hands as Emma pulled a perfect batch of cookies from the oven. The kitchen filled with the smell of melted chocolate and vanilla, the kind of ordinary magic that makes a house feel like sanctuary. "Tell me about the trial update," Emma said once Sophie had been sent home with a plate of cookies for her family. I pulled out the folder I'd been avoiding all afternoon. Marcus pleaded guilty to all charges yesterday. Life sentence without possibility of parole, plus an additional 99 years for good measure. His cooperation in the ongoing federal investigations earned him the privilege of serving his time in a medium security facility instead of maximum security. How do you feel about that? Honestly, I feel like justice looks exactly the way it should. He's going to spend the rest of his life in a cage, knowing that every person he tried to destroy is out here living free and helping other people avoid his fate. Emma nodded slowly. Dr. Wells says that the best revenge against people like Marcus is living well. Proving that they didn't break us. Smart woman. She wants to meet you, actually. She's been working with other family members of victims, helping them process their own trauma. Apparently, watching someone you love get hurt can be just as damaging as being hurt yourself. I'd been avoiding that conversation for months, but seeing Emma's steady gaze, I realized she was right. I'd spent so much energy making sure she was healing that I'd ignored my own wounds. "I'll think about it," I said, which we both knew meant yes. That evening, I walked through downtown Millbrook Valley as the sun set behind the courthouse where Marcus would never again wield influence. The town looked different now, cleaner somehow, as if removing the corruption had allowed people to breathe freely for the first time in years. I stopped at the small memorial park that had been built where Marcus's office used to stand. 12 plaques honored the women who'd died because they discovered his crimes and tried to expose them. Emma had insisted on the memorial, saying their names should be remembered even if their killer was forgotten. At the center of the memorial was a simple inscription: "They spoke truth to power." Their voices echo in every life that justice saves. My phone buzzed with a text from Maria Vasquez, saw the news about the sentencing. "How are you holding up?" I typed back, "Better than good. Stronger than before." And for the first time since this nightmare began, I realized that was completely true. The war was over. Justice had won. And Emma and I were both exactly where we belonged, home, healed, and helping others find their way back from the darkness. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to stay broken. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.